Here, so, Ed Smith, you want to come on, Dr. Ed Smith?
Yeah.
This is a great man of God. Most of you know him already, but he's a chaplain, a teacher of chaplains. He's currently with the Grand Prairie Police Department, right? Okay. He'll do a better job. Thank you. Hold on one second. And he will inspire you.
Thank you. Well, he talked about the word reset, right? Well, one of the things I want you to take away today also is the word resolute. Now, resolute can come in many different forms. I'm carrying a little 410 gauge walking stick. Now, when I used to hike up here, he used to call it the Moses stick. It was about 6 feet tall. But that's because we had a lot bigger snakes back then and I had to have it. So I've streamlined it. But what I'm resolute with this stick is I'm well known throughout a lot of North Texas that I do prayer hikes here, and I try to do 2 to 5 miles a day up here. And so since about 2018, I have not broken one day where I had less than 2 miles. Wow. So I've carried it over 888 plus whatever. 1 year alone, I did 2,222 miles. You have to be resolute. You have to have a purpose, and you have to get up every day and say, no matter what the rain is doing or how I'm aching, I made a promise resolutely that I'm going to walk and do prayer walks, and I carry a list with me. And I'll say, okay, this person asked me to pray. And while I'm there on Facebook, my phone has Facebook, people say, oh, I see you're on the mountain. And of course, those of you who heard me speak before, I had never met Pastor Summers. I'd always been hiking here, and how God put us together just cracked me up, and Doug Stringer and all these names. And I was just hiking around while all this stuff was going on. And people say, I used to see you walking back there. And then God resolutely brought me in through these front doors. Now, I'm going to lay my walking stick down for a minute, and he always asks if it's going to eat snakes and stuff when I lay it down. That's just to symbolize that Prayer Mountain means a lot to me. Now, as a chaplain, I'm wearing, some people ask me which uniform am I wearing today. This is my generic uniform. The reason why I represent the Dallas District Attorney, Dallas College PD, I'm in charge of all the 7 police stations that are on all of our community college campuses. I'm in charge of work with Criswell College PD's chaplain. In the city of West chaplain. I am beginning training as a deputy sheriff, believe it or not, this year, because they want me to come on board Collin County to be their deputy sheriff in charge of the chaplaincy programs I've created for all of our correction officers across Texas. I want you to keep them in prayer. The reason that I'm being led to do this in my 60s, I really don't want to go back through all these academies and stuff again, but here's why. Our correction officers commit suicide 4 times higher than the national rate, which is twice as high as police officers. They have alcoholism 4 times the rate of the national average. The average worker will not live to be 59. Do you think there's a problem?
Yeah.
They don't have their own chaplains. Inmates have chaplains. So God, through prayer walking, said, now I have a new station that I'm going to send you to. So I want you to keep me in prayer as I go to this next stage. Now, chaplaincy means a lot to me. And I'm going to show you how the church and chaplaincy sometimes, it's an extension beyond the 4 walls of the church, but it's still embedded in the theology of the church, meaning a chaplain carries the presence of Christ, which is the very term it comes from. Whenever you see a chaplain, it goes all the way back to St. Martin of Tours. It represents the presence of Christ is with you in the crisis, whether you're a police officer or soldier, whatever the crisis is, it represents, when you see a chaplain's uniform, keep hope because Christ is with you in this crisis. So keep that in mind. So I learned to study history, and I've trained 3,500 people in chaplaincy and all this. So my wife and I took a vacation. We went to Wilmington, North Carolina last year. Any of you been there? I'll tell you, if you can, put it on your bucket list, because in the middle of Wilmington Harbor is the USS North Carolina. And I went on board the USS North Carolina and grew up in Hawaii. Naval ships are important to me. You know, you grow up in the shadow of Pearl Harbor, you grow up in the shadow of the Arizona and the Missouri, and all of that. When my dad was a pastor, 1/3 of our church was military from Pearl Harbor. My wife came from Hickam Air Force Base. Anyway, we went on board, and one of the neatest things highlighted in the middle of the battleship was the chapel. So I said, hey, this is kind of cool. I'm going to go over and read about a chapel. And this is how much America has changed.
Oh, yeah.
When you went over to the chapel, there was a picture side by side that the chaplain stood next to the captain, and the captain stood next to the chaplain. There is the only time in the U.S. that they actually put one flag higher than the United States flag. In Easter, all the Navy vessels put the cross above the flag of the United States.
Wow.
Do you think that still goes on today?
Oh,
When they brought the chaplain in, it said the chaplain is in charge of our morale. The chaplain is in charge of making us a good church battleship.
wow.
Now I'm reading more history. This chaplain had to deal with kamikaze attacks. He had to bury people when the explosions hit the ships. He had to deal with the bodies being brought in off Iwo Jima and whatever would happen. And you're just learning all this and how the chaplain over and over and over. And so what I wanted you to do when you think of the word resolute, because it really struck me to say these words to you, is when they did this, the warship, the USS North Carolina, could be any warship that you're on. It only has one terrifying purpose. It's to take the war to the shores of the enemy that attacked you. And in that time period, it is to destroy any enemy that comes in front of it. And while it's doing that, all of the people on the crew are dedicated to one thing only. They keep their eyes on the day that will be called victory. They're going to live together, they're going to fight together, they're going to serve together, and they're going to keep saying to themselves, I'm isolated from my family, I'm isolated from this, I'm isolated from that, but they're also going to say this, it's temporal. This battleship is temporal. I have a purpose, I have a mission, I have a duty, I'm going to carry it out till I destroy anything that caused this warship to come into being. It had purpose, and it was resolute. They buried people together. They sang hymns together. They went through diseases together. They spent 4 years away from their homes with one eye only. Though everything's on board, I'm not to live here forever. I'm a sojourner on this battleship. What I'm encouraging you men to do, and women, which one of the two are you? Because you're always talking to two people. I'm talking to a sojourner or I'm talking to an earth dweller. An earth dweller would think the battleship is their permanent home. An earth dweller would be saying, if I can only just live another day, if I could do this, if I could do this. A sojourner says, I can't wait to get off this battleship, but while I'm on it, I'm going to accomplish my mission.
Yeah, that's good.
My hardship has a purpose. My resoluteness has a purpose. What are we going to do together? So I'm saying the church must take the attitude that it's battleship church. And right now we have to stop, in my mind as a chaplain, with everything I see, just like you did on a battleship. The church, if it's not teaching you the truth, you need to get out of that church. You better be learning what Jesus Christ is. You better be learning what the cross meant. You better be learning now, as we've just symbolically finished Christmas, we need to take the face of Jesus Christ. You go and look. When Lazarus was raised from the dead, I know I'm preaching a lot to the choir here, but it's part of Resolute. When he raised Lazarus from the dead, it triggered a reaction in Jerusalem. It triggered the high priest saying, that's it, this man is too dangerous, we're going to put an end to him. Most people don't link the two. Jesus had a fierce countenance that he scared people when he began his walk to Jerusalem. He was so resolute, like I would be on this prayer mountain, that everywhere he came in contact with, people were like pushed back at first. The power of that battleship he was pushing scared people because he was looking at people like, I got a mission to do. And I'm not going to stop because I'm resolute. And it's so fierce, I'm scaring you. The Samaritans, who he loved, tried to steal him. Go and study why. It's very interesting. They wanted to have him make their town Jerusalem and not go to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And Jesus gave them the look. And they said, here's the way, sir. You need to get going. What look do our churches have right now?
Yeah, they don't have it.
How fiercely committed is our countenance? This is one reason I'm saying why we need to have a battleship. And we need to understand we're at war. And then I want you, just a few things, not to bore you. But one of the things that when I teach on a lot, I teach about the role of the role of the church in grief and trauma. Folks, right now, we have a nation in trauma. We don't know who we are. We don't know what we are. We're tearing down things. We're burning things. We're afraid of this. We're afraid of that. We have hatred, racism, record crime, lawlessness. But folks, we always did. What's always been the answer in disasters from a chapel? The church. Which one gives more, the government or the church? It's not even close. It's the church. Where does all of our trained volunteers come out of? The church. Who's feeding in Kentucky and Tennessee right now? The church. Who responds to the hurricanes along the coast? The church. It keeps going. And yet, here's what's frightening. They did a survey. 70% of evangelicals in this survey, called the Probe Survey, which I'll give you all the information you want on it, said that Jesus is not the only way. And when I was reading that, I was going, well, that kind of fits, because 54% of our Christians have a postmodern worldview today. They are influenced by skepticism toward the main truth. There is no real truth. What are our churches teaching? How can 70% of people who call themselves born-again followers of Christ say, He's just one of the ways? They asked the Probe, well, do you think you're going to heaven? Oh, yeah, because I believe in Jesus Christ. Well, then what teachings of Jesus Christ are you following? Did Jesus Christ say He was one of the ways? Did He put on a fierce countenance because He said, later on it's not going to really matter as long as you're just good people? He was here because we're good people. Good people don't go to heaven. Saved people go to heaven. Period. So if you're not saved, how are you going to get there? What are our churches teaching? When you go through what I believe is ailing our nation, and which is why I believe it's more important than ever, the local church. I'm sure you're familiar with Michael Youssef. Michael Youssef wrote the following 7-step plan, and I'm only going to concentrate on one. Listen. He says, we need to get back to the 7 R's. We need to remember the truth. We need to restore the soul. We need to revitalize the family. We need to reestablish the classroom. I think we'd all agree on that. We need to respect our freedoms, which we're losing. We need to reform our society. And number 7, we need to revive our own church. How can we have 70% of evangelicals say Jesus Christ is not the only way? How can we have 59% of our young people in church, not secular, believe Marxism is a true way of life? Marxism kills Christians.
Sure it does.
You just brought your own toxic poison into your own environment. We are now following paganism. We are now following secularism. We're now following progressivism, communism, socialism, revisionists, and so on and on and on. So, do you want to be a person that's filled with rage all the time? Anger, self-truth, narcissism, hatred, racism, victimizing one another, being the victim, always offended? That is called an earth dweller. What is the solution? Battleship Church, with Jesus Christ at the helm. We have to prepare our believers to understand who said it was going to be a cakewalk on this earth. Who said that the only way to happiness is to live like the world? Why is the world committing record suicides? The tearing down of God with a G has led to the rise of the little g's, the little gods. And the little gods right now are telling you, just believe in something. The little gods are telling you that you are your God. The little gods are telling you it's okay to kill children. Do you think our first century church faced the same thing we are in today? That and more. But let me tell you something to add to your prayer list. Every day, 300 to 600 Christians are going to die somewhere in the world. Before today's sun sets, somebody will be killed simply for not denying Christ. It's all around us already. One of the beauties I love of prayer walking here is if you listen carefully, you will hear prayers in so many languages surrounding these buildings. And all I have to do is have a posting on Facebook, and somebody from India will say, I stopped there when I was in Texas and I went to where you're at. I don't even know the people. There's certain places God puts his hand. You're on one of the spots. So we need to restore our churches. We need to understand that we are both a battleship and we wear armor. Why do you wear armor? You're going to be in a fight. If you're already afraid of that fight, then you need to lean in on your church and say, I need more discipling. I need to understand why I'm wearing this armor. And while you're wearing the armor, there's one key place that doesn't have any. Your back. Study it. There's no armor on your back because God is your back. God is on the deck of the battleship. We are going to fight together, people. We're going to serve together. But it also means at some point in our nation, we must understand what's outside the doors of this church are going to come in through the doors of this church. It's already started on the organized chaplaincies throughout our government. It's already, we're seeing it in the way that they're doing the illnesses and the this and the that. I'm not going to get off on that right now. What I'm telling you is we are in the time period right now that if you're not on a battleship, you better be on one. You better be prepared for the fight, know who you're fighting with, who you're fighting for, and what kind of faith are you going to bring into that fight. Jesus Christ's countenance needs to be on each of us right now. Not only the countenance of the fierceness of his face, but the compassion of his heart. We got to do two things at one time. We have to pray against the world and forgive the world that's eventually trying to kill you, because he did. At the same time, we have to be tough enough to take whatever the world is going to bring. We're already having people decide what jobs they're going to keep or not keep based on a little card. It's happening. Sweden already has a chip that can be put into your body that can actually let your brain see videos. See videos, just as if you had a hardware. So what does that mean? Receptors. Now, am I trying to scare you? No, this is part of what a church is supposed to be doing. At one time, you had to register in the first century church this, so they could come and take it. They had to do this. What did they do? They did whatever the law told them to do, and they kept preaching, kept building orphanages, hospitals, feeding. What are we doing today? We look exactly like the first century church. But folks, in Canada, they're already putting pastors in prison for preaching on anything related to lifestyle. Even quoting the scripture. The Bible is now considered a hate book in Canada. This is a fellow democracy. Remember, 59% of our own people don't even have a worldview of being saved. 70% of evangelicals in that survey believe Jesus is not the only way. So if you start knocking that out, who do you pray to for healing? Who do you pray to for forgiveness? How do you make it through loving your neighbor that's spitting in your face? You see where I'm coming from? If they keep removing your values, then what will stand when it's all said and done? How many men were standing with Jesus at the cross? Think about that for just a moment. Didn't mean they didn't come back. They were in the presence of Jesus, and still only one stood with his mother. So my challenge to you is resolute, battleship church. Wear your armor and know why you're in a fight. How many of you believe in the Good Samaritan parable that we are to love our neighbor as we love God with everything we have?
Yes.
And if we do that, then how many of us believe we need to share the gospel of who Jesus Christ is? And if we're doing that, then what are we doing and how are we implementing that in our marketplaces, in our daily life? And then, do you think that you can ever be down as a Christian? Ever get down as a Christian? Sure. That's why you have brothers and sisters. That's why you come and you say, I'm calling out to the Holy Spirit, but I also know that there's times that I need my brothers and sisters to walk with me so I know I can get that strength in them. So that right now, one of the things Satan does as a chaplain Because it happens for me, all the officers that I counsel with and so forth, they'll always say, I feel like I don't have enough faith. I feel like I just can't do it. I feel like, God, why is he going to reach down to me of all people? Why are we going to do this? If you're feeling this right now, we're going to pray over that. Because I want you to live victorious. And I want you to live on that battleship with your eyes on the focus of that mission. We're only going to be on this battleship for a few more years, right? Would you want to trade a few more years of this or eternity in heaven? Man, I don't want this to be my eternity. I don't want this to be the best part of my life. I want it to be part of my life and as good as I can have it. But I also want you to have that life abundantly.
Amen.
And we need to keep remembering that's why you lift everybody up. And you say, you're worth it, and you're worth it, and you're worth it because he died for you, and died for you, and died for you, and he loved you, and he loved you, and he loved you, and he loved me. And once you do that, you really can live for others. And then you see why you must have the church. So this is the favorite one officers love to do to me. Chaplain, I really like you and everything, but I'm just not a churchy person. I'll say, okay, describe what's a churchy person. Well, I worship in my own way. And I do this, and I do it, because all pastors are phony and all churches are phony. And I say, wow, that's kind of insulting. They'll go, it is? I said, what's God's instrument on earth? Who does he call his bride? Did he tell you to go off in the woods by yourself and live a life and somehow you're going to have, did he not say to not forsake fellowship? I have to strike back when you have an opportunity to remind them, you're not above God's commandments. He told us to go to church. He said together in his name. What we can do in Battleship Earth, a Battleship Church, the governments of the world wish they could do. Because we do ours voluntarily. We do ours out of commandment of love. We do ours because, folks, I hope you are listening to the teachings of your pastor and then getting out of the building. We're not meant to just sit with the knowledge. You're meant to take it. You want to learn video stuff? Do you just play around with it, or you got a purpose why you're learning that video stuff? Because then you want to put it in action. You want to edit, add music, sound effects. By the way, I'd love to be 6'8". If you could add the hair, it'd be fantastic. The point is, we want to take our gifts and then we want to run with them, right? But when it comes to church, well, let's just sit here and just listen to good teachings. And I want you to be resolute today. I want you to pray about being in a battleship church. I want you to think literally that you wear armor, that God looks down and says, there's one of my knights, there's one of my warriors. He's not asking you to carry the weight of the world. He's asking you to carry the weight of him and the cross on you, that he freed you from everything and said, when it's done, he meant it was done, but you got a role in it. He lets us be in the Great Commission. Don't have to be. He told us the Great Commandment. He made us a part of loving our neighbors. You know why? We get narcissistic.